Hello, New Mexico, and welcome to Around the Roundhouse, a podcast featuring the politics, personalities, and policies of the land of enchantment from the Roundhouse and beyond. My name is Daniel Chacón, and I'm the state government reporter for the Santa Fe New Mexican. Last week, we took our podcast on the road. This week, we're upping our podcasting game and adding a video element. And I couldn't be more pleased than to have as our first guest, New Mexico's Lieutenant Governor, Howie Morales. Before becoming the state's 30th Lieutenant Governor, Morales served in the state Senate for 11 years. A former teacher, Morales is known as a staunch education advocate and was instrumental in the creation of the still relatively new Early Childhood Education and Care Department. Lieutenant Governor, thank you so much for joining us today.
Daniel, it's always good opportunity to speak with you, and I'm very proud to be the first on video interview that you do. So in the short time that you started this, which I think is a wonderful program to New Mexicans, but you've really evolved this into something that is getting more attention. So proud to be here as a guest.
Thank you so much, sir. It's my understanding that you're down in Las Cruces. Can you tell us what you're doing down in southern New Mexico?
I am. I'm a proud graduate. I got my doctorate degree here in New Mexico State. So it's like coming back home. And what we're here is we're talking about infrastructure. We're in the transportation conference and over 700 guests that I'll be speaking to in a bit to really share the importance of what infrastructure means in our state, where we're at, what we can continue to do to improve, and to recognize that these workers, especially those workers day in and day out, who are taking care of all of us, to have an opportunity to thank them.
Well, we've made quite a big investment in transportation, thanks in large part to our budget surpluses that we've had. So that must you must be able to deliver good news.
It really is, and I think that when you look and see where we've been, I was in the state Senate, as you mentioned, for 11 years. There was a time where we had 0% reserves. There was a time where we were struggling and having to claw back funds from every area. So we're grateful that we see the impact of what's taken place with a lot of the oil and gas surpluses that we see, a lot of the diversification of our budget, whether it's outdoor economy, whether it's other areas that we focused on. It truly has paid off for the state.
Lieutenant Governor, you were sort of in familiar territory. Tell us about your upbringing, because you grew up in Silver City, the son of a copper miner. Did you ever imagine being Lieutenant Governor when you were growing up as a kid?
I always had the interest of service. Whether it was in student council or there was there with my church organizations, or even with the youth programs. I always had that want to be there to provide service. Believe it or not, I always thought of one day potentially being governor of the state. So being lieutenant governor is pretty close, but more so is just having the chance to connect with people all across New Mexico. I'm grateful for this opportunity, especially because when you see the needs that are out there and helping people navigate through that makes the job all worthwhile.
I want to talk to you about your political aspirations later on, but since you're a former teacher, I wanted to ask you if you could give us a civics lesson of sorts and tell us what are the responsibilities of a lieutenant governor?
Yeah,
what
absolutely.
does a lieutenant governor do?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the question. A lot of times when I first came in office 7 years ago, and I would invite people to my office, many of them would say that they didn't even know where the lieutenant governor's office was in the Roundhouse. And now I'm happy to say that it's bustling, especially during session, people coming in and out. And it really is something that I'm grateful for. That is why I instituted the honorary lieutenant governor of the day, because I wanted to provide that in-depth experience of what the office actually does, from the executive side to the legislative side. So my role as lieutenant governor, obviously the spotlight is the work that I do, chairing and presiding over the Senate during the session. Yes. I love doing that. And I love doing the joint sessions as well with the House of Representatives. But having the chance off screen, off camera, to get out into the communities, I think that has been the most rewarding, because I come from a rural community, as you mentioned, a copper community in Silver City. And I know what rural New Mexico needs. And I know what it is that they're asking for. And the best way to do that is to be there in person. So a lot of my time is spent traveling every part of the state to be available and to be present for whatever those needs may be. I have constitutional duties, and recognizing that education is always an important part of what I do. So I spend many times in the classrooms, going around seeing different programs that may be available and incorporating some of the after school, out of school time programs as the importance of a component for learning. Other areas that I've continually worked on is I'm very involved in the aerospace industry. As chair of the Secretary of the Aerospace States Association on a national level and chairing the state association, that keeps me busy as well. But never to forget the importance of what we have also with our military bases. I chair the Military Base Planning Commission, and to make sure that we're always protecting the bases that we have in New Mexico, because it's such a vital component to our overall economy and quality of life. So many more things that I do, and specifically when you look and see housing and the issues that we deal with that as well. Being a member of the Mortgage Finance Authority is also very, very productive. As you saw just this, last week, as I did, the gov being out of state, did issue over 30 executive orders. And we work in collaboration. And that's one thing that I have to say that I'm grateful for, because what we have in the state of New Mexico is pretty unique. You don't always have governors and lieutenant governors who work together so well. Okay. In our state, we understand that we have to work together well to have the betterment of all New Mexicans. And so issuing those over 30 executive orders that get money directly to those flood victims that took place in Lincoln County and Chavez County and other parts of the state, I'm proud to be able to do that. So as you can see, it's a busy work. It's very rewarding, and grateful for that.
I know you mentioned that you work well with the governor. Are there ever times where you all butt heads?
I think that makes the component of a great team. I think that anytime that you can have different points of view is always a healthy environment. And I think if it was opposite, then I wouldn't be doing the work I needed to be doing. The governor wouldn't be doing the work she needed to be doing. But we have that trust that's established, that even though we may have disagreements, that we understand that at the end of the day, we're going to do what's best for the people of the state of New Mexico. So I'm grateful to have that relationship with the governor. And like I said, most lieutenant governors do not have that relationship with their governors in each respective state.
Lieutenant Governor, may I ask you, when the governor is out of state, do you head up to the fourth floor and sit in her chair and at her desk?
There's just some things you just don't do, and that's one of the things that you don't do. But yes, I'm grateful in all my 7 years that I have access to, the executive. As being a member of the executive, I can call any cabinet secretary. I can get information that's needed, and they're always available. I'm truly grateful for that, and I don't take that for granted, because that accessibility is key for me to do my job, specifically as a state ombudsman, to help people with the constituent issues that they have. You've got to have that cabinet that's right there supporting you and behind you. And fortunately, I do have that.
Okay. As you mentioned, one of your duties is presiding over the Senate during the legislative session. Obviously, you've had some years of experience doing that, but is it a little bit like herding cats from time to time?
I had a wonderful advantage as lieutenant governor, because I served there in the Senate as a member for 11 years. And I had those relationships, the friendships for both sides of the aisle. That is absolutely critical, because when you get in a role, as I am in, sometimes you're a person of one. Sometimes you're a referee. Sometimes you're there as a coach. Sometimes you're there as a consultant trying to help. And so, understanding from the Senate side of it, I give them flexibility, and I give them a little leniency to share what their views are, as long as it's within reason. One of the things that I'm most grateful for as president of the Senate is I believe that we run a respectful chamber, and it's according to decorum, to making sure that we know when the temperature gets hot, that we can calm that down. At the end of the day, our job is there to do what's best for New Mexicans, not to let personalities get in the way, including my own. And I never want to make being president of the Senate be about me. I don't go up there trying to beat my chest. I don't go up there trying to lecture anybody. I try to make sure to maintain the decorum in a respectful way, so that everyone knows it's a fair process.
So you set the tone, you set the example.
I do. And again, I think that goes back to my coaching days and what it is that I did to help really optimize human potential, and to recognize that if you want championship teams, in this case, a championship Senate, that we have to make sure that we work collaboratively, even through the disagreements.
Okay. Well, speaking of legislative sessions, this was your last 60-day session. Were you feeling emotional, or was there, what were you feeling as the legislature was gaveling out?
That's a great point, Daniel, because every day I would take a deep breath and I would recognize it as one day less of chairing the 60-day session. And it gave me a chance to reflect. I've enjoyed every moment of being lieutenant governor, even through the difficult times, even through a pandemic.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed it. But I have to say, this year was my most enjoyable session.
Why
And I
is
think
that?
it was because we had the biggest freshman class that I can remember, maybe in the history of the state of New Mexico, that I had to help them to understand the process, to understand the rules of the Senate, and to do it in a way where I got to know them as people. That was rewarding for me because it really exemplifies that it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican, we have to work together as 42 members to ensure that we're doing what we can for the best of people of the state. And so it was rewarding. So I think that as I reflected in my time, it's something that I'll always be grateful for. It'll be one of the greatest honors of my life. But I still have one more session to go, and I'm looking forward to that as well.
We were in the same cabinet room when the governor kind of, was less than pleased with the outcome of the 60-day session. Do you think that the legislature fell short on the public safety front this year?
Obviously the public has mandated that we need to make sure that we're doing more. I have young kids. I have kids and I have my family members, just as all of us do. We want a safer New Mexico. And I do think that there's more that has to be done. The governor was absolutely right in sharing that we didn't get where we needed to be, to make sure that we can have the laws in place, making sure we can have the policies in place to hold violent criminals, including those that are younger, accountable. I think our public is really asking for that. So there's more work that has to be done, and I'm always going to make sure to support the governor and her efforts to ensure that we have a safer New Mexico.
Do you, speaking of support, do you support the governor? I mean, it sounds like the governor's leaning toward holding a special session. Would you support her in that pursuit? And do you think that that's a good idea?
Yeah, absolutely. I support her in that because, again, we have a mandate from the public that we want to have policies in place that are going to add to the safety and well-being of New Mexicans. But I would also want to make sure, as being a member of the legislature in the past, that those discussions have to happen early on and to understand where we're all coming from, to ensure that we can have some type of plan going in. I think that's absolutely beneficial because you can go into a special session and not have a plan in place and then come out with really nothing accomplished. Right. So I would greatly encourage that collaboration between the legislature and between us.
Okay. I wanted to switch gears here a little bit and switch back to your political aspirations. I wanted to ask, what's next for Howie Morales? I read you're considering seeking the Democratic nomination for governor and possibly the presidency at Western.
Yeah, well, I can tell you what's next is I love and most enjoyable being a parent. So what's next is I got to coach my son's Little League game.
Right on.
So I'll do that. But yeah, there's a lot of possible options out there. I feel strongly that New Mexico is home, and I want to do all I can to help New Mexico benefit in every way. I do bring the experience, and if I choose to run for governor, which I've heard so much support from people all across the state who have seen that I've had that consistent approach to governing, that approach that can look at all points of views and make sure that we have policies in place to help us to get from where we were at 0% reserves to now what we see, fortunately, with the leadership of Governor Lujan Grisham. So I do have been weighing my options. If I choose to run for governor, I would do it with in mind of wanting to make sure that New Mexicans from all points of view and all places of the state have a representative in that governor's office that truly understands what their needs are. And there's other discussions that may be available too. I'm an educator at heart. So once an educator, you're always an educator. And the work that we've been able to do specifically in higher education has been monumental. And in my hometown where I grew up on the campus of Western New Mexico University, me and my friends would play baseball there. We would go in the buildings, we would play hide and seek. We would do so many things that have such wonderful memories. There may be an opportunity there that going back home to the university that I love so much to really make an impact and to get to that point where I know that Mustang Nation is proud of, we can get there. So that's another option there, but I'll see things how they go. Grateful on both opportunities for the amount of support that people have sent in whatever decision that I choose.
And it sounds like you have sort of a self-imposed deadline of June to decide, to announce or decide whether or not you'll launch a gubernatorial campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. And nowadays it seems like campaigns are starting earlier and earlier.
Oh yeah.
When I ran for lieutenant governor the first time, I didn't get until December before the primary, and that was really late. That was really stressful. My team was amazing to ensure that we got all of our signatures and raised money as best we could. And that was stressful. So I understand that it has to be done earlier, especially when you have two candidates who've already rolled out on the Democratic side, strong rollouts. That pushes the timeline up a little bit. And so right around June, I think a decision should be made one way or another.
Okay.
I'm ready to make that once that time comes.
And I know you touched on this, but if you do decide to run for governor, what would be your pitch to voters over why they should pick you over, say, Deb Haaland or Sam Bregman?
Yeah, and I have tremendous amount of respect for both of them and others who may get in. But when it comes down to it, experience matters. And understanding it from the legislative side, the executive side, knowing the struggles that New Mexico has had in areas that we can continue to build. We've done some amazing things in the state. We've seen that we have leadership across the nation when it comes to early childhood education. I was proud to bring that piece of legislation forward as a senator, and was even more proud when the governor signed it into law. We see the work that's being done across the state when we talk about infrastructure and the smart approach to having a better, healthier New Mexico. I'm in for that. And so I think that, again, experience goes a long way, and then understanding what the needs are, because I've been in all 33 counties numerous times, and recognizing what it is that people are needing and are asking for.
And if I'm not mistaken, you ran for or sought the Democratic nomination in 2014 and finished fourth in a 5-way primary. So I wanted to ask you what would be different this time around. Do you think it's the experience that you bring that would really elevate your candidacy?
Absolutely. Experience,
I should say.
Yeah, experience goes a long way, and I ran in 2014, even at the recommendation from some people that I really admire, and thinking that it was going to be a long haul. And boy, did I learn a tough lesson. When you run the legislative race, it's different than running statewide. I was fortunate to win the pre-primary convention.
Yeah,
as the youngest candidate at that time. I believe there was 5 candidates that were running the primary side, and then realizing and recognizing the challenges that come with name ID, with raising funds, and having ran now 3 statewide elections, I have an understanding of what that takes, and I know what's in store and what could be done. So again, there's not enough can be said for experience, but also for that resiliency and that effort to get out there to do the work that needs to be done to get your message out.
Lieutenant Governor, I was going to mention to you before I forget that I don't know of any other lieutenant governor in New Mexico, at least, who has been inducted into the Softball Hall of Fame. Can you tell us about your connection to softball? And if I'm not mistaken, it started with baseball, right?
It did. Sports has been such a big part of my life. It was really the effort that my coaches, my volunteers, my dad had done for so many years. That's where the academic piece came in, was through the vehicle of athletics and sports. So that's always been a part of me, and grateful for that. I did have many good years of constantly playing softball, playing baseball, traveling around, and was inducted into the Hall of Fame. Very grateful for that. But even more so is grateful for the relationships that you build over all those years. So there may be a lot of people across the state who are voters who may not really understand the ins and outs of when it comes to what is important for policy side, but they know me as a person. They know me from those experiences of playing many years. And the way I conducted myself on the field is the same way that I conduct myself in the Senate, is to make sure that it's always going to be respectful. So there's a whole bunch of people out there that could care, very little about the politics of it, but they want to make sure they have a person that they can trust.
Lieutenant Governor, you're known as one of the nicest guys in New Mexico state politics. I was going to ask you, is it difficult always being nice?
Well, I think that there's times, just like when I ran for governor in 2014, I ran for a specific purpose because I did not like the policies that were in place when it came to education. And because of that, you can still be kind, you can be respectful, at the same time standing your ground. And I think, fortunately, that's something that I've always been able to do throughout my life, is that you can keep those relationships in place even through the disagreements. And so it's something that comes natural. I don't go above and beyond to try to be nice or extra kind. I think just second nature to me, and always want to make sure people see me as a regular human being, not necessarily a person who's in an office, with the second highest seat in the state. That's not what I want to be remembered for. I want to be remembered for a person that's approachable, respectful, accessible, and available to all parts of the state.
Fantastic. Well, Lieutenant Governor, it's been such a pleasure to spend time with you. Thank you so much. Is there anything that I'm missing to ask you? Anything you'd like to share with New Mexicans who are either listening in or watching this podcast?
I'm just grateful again for the open arms that every community has given me when it comes to the work that I do, whether it's really promoting school safety, whether it's promoting the after school, out of school type programs, the aerospace industry, our military bases, education as a whole, specifically higher ed, early childhood, those kind of things. I'm very proud to have been a part of the success that we've had. We still have more work to do. We're not done. We're not going to sit back and just wait for our term to end. We're going to do more work because the people of the state expect us to do that. And that's a big reason why I'm here in Las Cruces today, to share that message.
All right. Well, Lieutenant Governor, again, thank you so much. And thank you to our listeners for tuning into Around the Roundhouse. Until next time, I'm Daniel Chacón.